It's 1947, and an architect and Holocaust survivor arrives in America with the hope of rebuilding his life. Here's what happens next.
Was a war on, and yet many of the sites of my projects had survived. My buildings were devised to endure such erosion of
The
shoreline.
Brutalist follows Laszlo Toth over the course of 30 years as he builds and designs the Institute, a monumental community center honoring a wealthy American family. Brady Corbet is the director and started his career as an actor, but already won Best Director at the 2024 Venice Film Festival on top of several Golden Globe nominations for The Brutalist. Brady is our guest in studio. I'm so glad that you're here this morning. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, you spent 7 years working on The Brutalist, and you co-wrote it with your partner, Mona. These days, it is hard to walk into a theater and witness and live through an original storyline. What was this process like?
Yeah, all of my films are virtual histories, and the character was inspired by a lot of mid-century designers like Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, Paul Rudolph, of course, Marcel Breuer, but the character is a work of fiction.
The movie is about architecture and design, but the designs in this film are incredible. That library, we showed a little bit of that scene, where those shelves open up. Tell me about coming up with the concept of those and that moment where you gasped when those shelves opened.
My wife and I both have architects in our family. My uncle went to Taliesin West, Frank Lloyd Wright School in Arizona, and lived with my mother and I while he was going there. And my wife, Mona, who wrote the film with me, her grandfather's also a mid-century designer, or you know, was back in Norway. So we'd wanted to do a film on architecture for quite a long time, and there's surprisingly few films on the subject. And we decided to focus on the post-war years because post-war architecture and post-war psychology for us are sort of intrinsically linked.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about the buildings and the design, which are a big part of this movie, of course, but the character of Laszlo, his experience watching him arrive in America post-war, and that experience of what he lives through, the dignities and the indignities of being someone new in this country. Tell me where you drew those storylines from, those scenarios where he faces being treated like he knows less, like he's worthless, like he doesn't have this incredible career behind him.
Well, the film is very much about how the immigrant experience mirrors the artistic one, in the sense that, you know, when a community, a community's instinct to you know, have something unfamiliar torn down or a new neighbor thrown out. I mean, that's sort of the film's central theme.
You've been receiving a lot of accolades, a lot of praise, a lot of buzz for this film. What is the piece of this that you are the most proud of? 7 years is a long time to put into something.
Oh, you know, honestly, I'm just thrilled that it exists. And it was a very, very difficult film to make. And, you know, it fell apart many times over the years. And so, you know, it's great that people are responding to it, but we, you know, for me, it's really just icing on the cake, because, you know, once we locked picture, I've you know, that was sort of the triumph back then.
That's very meta. It's like a metaphor of a building, which is a metaphor for the life of Laszlo.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Well, I mean, there's a lot, you know, that, you know, being a filmmaker and the life of an architect, there's a lot of sort of overlap in the Venn diagram.
Yeah, one more thing about Laszlo's personality that I love is that he has this inner sense of pride in who he is. He does not compromise, even when he's in a position where people think he should just take what he gets and feel lucky. What is it that you wrote into him that said, no?
Well, I think that most architects and most filmmakers are also, you know, quite stubborn, and you sort of have to be, because it's a lot of noise. I mean, when you're working on a project that requires, you know, the involvement of 250 people, you sort of have to stay very, very focused, because 250 people means 250 ideas. Yeah. And it's like, you know, when you pick up a novel, you don't want to read a novel written by 250 people. You want to read a novel for its singular voice. And so, I think it's important. It's a collaboration as well, and it's I of course rely on my collaborators, but I think that it's important to sort of protect the flame of the project and its singularity.
Why brutalist architecture as the basis for this story?
Well, because it's still controversial, even 75 years later. Trump had a mandate back in his first term called Make Federalist Buildings Beautiful Again, which was a specific attack on the brutalist architecture in Washington, D.C. For me, the visual allegory of brutalism was, most appropriate for this story.
Brady, it was a real honor to meet you. Thank you for coming into the studio. I'm glad we got a chance to talk because I had so many questions after your film.
Thank you so much. I wish we had more time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. If you liked that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.